We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello, and welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose. My name is Kurt North, and I am here to talk all matter of Red Dwarf. And this week we're looking at Stasis Leak, but before we introduce that episode, I'm going to introduce my guests. First off, Mark, I have a question for you.
Hello. Go on then.
What is it?
Nice start, Kurt.
It's a great start. You know, I've been meaning to say that for ages. I absolutely love that line. And joining us is the same recurring guest from last week, and that would be Matt Latham. Matt, how are you doing today, mate?
I'm cracking up. I've been stuck here for a week. Why have you kept me here?
We could just go down to deck 16 and just restart it all over again if you want.
Yeah, might as well.
Put you in stasis.
Put you in stasis. Yeah, we'll bring him back. We'll bring him back from stasis, and let's do it. Let's do it. So we are talking Stasis Leak for this episode, and it's season 2, episode 4. It was directed by Ed Bye, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and it originally aired on the 27th of September 1988. And we do get the opening Holly scene, as we have done for the last few episodes. And in this one, depending on which version you watched, you would have got different things. So, so did you get a Felicity Kendall gag in this episode, Matt? You did, Mark?
Yes,
I did.
Okay.
Felicity Kendall.
So
bottom.
if you were watching the remastered, they changed it to Marilyn Monroe. So there's a bit of thing for you, apparently. So I also got the Felicity Kendall. I watched the Netflix version. I've got the, just because I'm that lazy, I can't be bothered to get the DVDs out, to be honest. But yeah,
I guess the Marilyn Monroe joke makes it a bit more timeless, doesn't it? Whereas Felicity Kendall, isn't she like 90 now, or was she dead?
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things, though, isn't it? I mean, it's the same thing as the. Is it the Gone with the Wind remake with Peter Beardsley joke, where it's a very niche kind of cultural reference?
Yeah.
That does date it. Whereas Marilyn Monroe is perhaps marketed towards the international audience and thus slightly more timeless.
Yeah, well, I think they even thought of removing the Jimmy Osmond joke. I don't know if that was this episode or the one before it, for similar reasons. And it was exactly that. It was exactly more that they felt that it dated the episode, so they wanted to bring something more timeless to it. So it's interesting that they have gone into that depth of changing these things. And as you say, the stuff that they've done, and they've done there's quite a few bits on the remastered versions compared to our versions, have taken maybe some jokes out. And it's interesting in this council culture that we're going through at the moment. And Gone with the Wind, I think, is mentioned in this episode, isn't it? So, and the fact that that's gone off quite a few, streaming sites and whatever because of the Black Lives Matter stuff. That, and I know it's, Red Dwarf's not looking at council culture. It's more the fact that, it's dating the joke. But it is interesting that they're going back in and doing that on the remasters, really.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. I feel like a science fiction show should try and make timeless references, and when they clearly haven't, should it be retconned or not? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think it's not a case of referencing things that are cancelled. I think.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's like it's not. It's just the fact that they're remastering and changing stuff around, and I don't think it's cancelling culture in that point of view. I'm just saying it's interesting that. We're looking at a remaster with things that they've changed just for more timeless stuff, but this kind of cancel culture is actually starting to become a thing in our modern world at the moment, and just relating to the two really. But it's got nothing to do with either or the other.
Okay, I don't know. I can see the reasons of why they changed it. I think part of me kind of don't know. I mean, I can see why, but I do think you kind of lose that kind of like time caption. You kind of lose that time capsule element of something. Then again, though, if this was a series set in 1989 and they're making jokes about Felicity Kendall, then yeah, I can see if they remove the Felicity Kendall joke from like something set in the present day of when it was recorded, then you can see it being a bit iffy, and it's more of a time capsule of what the show and the culture was like back then. The references, because this is probably a general question about the references that the contemporary references they have in Red Dwarf all the time. Felicity Kendall does date it, and then you're probably going to get people who are discovering the show. Perhaps people are probably watching it for the first time. I know people that I work with who are watching Red Dwarf for the first time because it's on Netflix. Probably will, and they're a bit younger than me. Have no idea who Felicity Kendall is, but probably have a better idea of who Marilyn Monroe is. So yeah, so I can understand. Yeah, I can understand wider than that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think because I know who Felicity Kendall is, so the joke works for me, but I don't know, it's one of those weird things. I mean...
Right, can I ask you both a question? Because I don't know the answer to this. Does Felicity Kendall have a particularly pleasant bottom? Or did she in the 80s?
See, now that's the question that I don't know.
Look it up on the internet. I want to know. I can't answer this question, can I?
I'm going to have a look. Felicity Kendall, pictures of Felicity Kendall.
Felicity Kendall's bottom. That's what you need to put in your search engine.
Do I have to put that in? Like, you were desperate for my, internet searches to go mental, aren't you?
Well, you've got your pop-up Kama Sutra now.
What was the other thing the other week? There was something else the other week as well.
Oh, shit, I can't remember.
I tell you what, if you put Felicity Kendall's bottom in, about halfway down the page, Red Dwarf appears.
Of course it does.
Okay. The first search result is Reader of the Year. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, so I think she won Reader of the Year in 1981.
So she must have a particularly pleasant bottom then.
Well, for that year, she did.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
oh man! At least
then again, yeah. But saying that, when was it? When was this filmed? 1988.
1988.
Okay, yeah. So 1989 and 1990, there was no competition, but there was a winner in 1988, and I can perhaps see why they went with the 1981 winner instead of 1988. Do you want to hazard any guesses of who the winner was?
No, because I'd only make a really tasteless joke.
Well, Sue Pollard won. Sue Pollard.
Okay.
So I don't think...
Pollard got a nice bottom then.
Do you think... I don't really want to start a whole conversation about...
We're going to start a Heidi High podcast, aren't we?
No, we're bloody not.
The botcast. The botcast.
The botcast. I wish I had an answer.
Each week we go through Rear of the Year and introduce Mark to all the rears. Lend me your rears.
All the bottoms.
Bottoms. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on. Let's talk about Red Dwarf. So we open with a scene. Now, this is something I wanted to get your... It goes back to what we were saying last week about Rimmer and the Johari window kind of thing I was talking about last week, about what he doesn't realise. So this scene with Lister on report is that it's a whole scene of Rimmer kind of rhyming off all the things that went wrong, and it sets up a gag with the mushrooms and Rimmer seeing himself later on, which is brilliant writing. But Rimmer just will not give it up. He will not. He keeps speaking and Hollister's trying to tell him, that's enough, Rimmer, and he just keeps going and he keeps going. He's just completely blindsided by his duty and what he thinks is right. And he thinks that is what an officer should do. That even his superiors, he cannot get his head around the fact that you need to stop this because you're making a fool of yourself. What do you make of that then, Matt? Because it's interesting from me on that, because it's like, Rimmer, you're not doing yourself any favours. You're just not doing yourself any favours, and you're not aware of that situation. So what do you think to that?
I think it's kind of proving when you think about it. If we think about, inverted commas, last week when we talked about Thanks for the Memory, where Lister says that the biggest problem that Rimmer has is that it is interaction with people. And I think this is pretty much proving that. This is kind of proving that Rimmer can't read the room or read the situation, whereas Lister can. And I think it's probably unintentional, but I do quite like the idea that after that conversation in the previous episode, we have an example of Rimmer not being able to know when to stop talking. So
I was really pleased to see Captain Hollister back. I thought that was cool that they brought him. They brought him back after such a long time. It's episode 4 of season 2. That's pretty cool that they could get him back. And I also like the fact that it was in black and white for the past. I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yeah. It's obviously a trope of flashback scenes, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think in the remasters, I think they actually changed the kind of vignette as well, from what I've read. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I do like this idea of it black and white. And I'll tell you another thing, the reason why I quite like it as well is that I think we mentioned a few episodes ago, maybe in the first or second episode, that I think it was Carl that mentioned it, that the greys are still there, but the colours starting to contrast. There's contrasting colours. And we see this black and white scene, but later on, Rimmer's uniform is bright, like stay alert, control the virus, save lives colour. It's like literally that kind of colour, isn't it? It's a bright yellow, kind of orangey kind of colour. And it's interesting how they've got that contrast now, and they're starting to bring colour into the show, even though the sets are still grey.
Yeah. Maybe the black and white is actually a reference to the first series being really grey as well.
I don't know whether it's. I think it's just a visual cue in that the creative crew are assuming that the general audience are going to be stupid and think, "Hang on, what's going on? Why is there a guy with an American accent in here? Where's the H gone? Blah blah blah." So I think the decision to go for the black and white is to have some sort of visual cue to just remind people that this is something different. So I've got and then when you jump ahead, and suddenly you jump ahead to the present, inverted commas, present day, Red Dwarf, 3 million years in the future, the audience are not going to be confused about why it's just the two of them and the cat again. So I think it's more of a visual cue, I think, more than perhaps a stylistic one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it is, I'm just thinking it is quite striking when we do go back through the Stasis Leak, that when we do eventually see Rimmer, that uniform is like, whoa. It's like sort of, it's almost hurts the eyes. It's that bright, and if you think back to Series 1 before the Stasis Leak actually happened, or before the actual ship gets radiated, that the uniforms were grey, so they kind of like they've updated it, and I think it's right to do that because it does have that presence. But it's just interesting that you do have that contrast of the black and white with this colour going back in time. And what's interesting with going back to the scene is that, as you say, it's Rimmer gets to a point throughout this of not really realising what he's saying and taking it too far, to the point where he actually says, respects, you've got your head right up your big fat ass. So it's like, now when he suddenly realises it, he can't help himself but to like put that in, because he's found himself like in a position he didn't expect to be in.
I like how Rimmer is always appalled when people aren't following the rules completely, and he then ends up breaking the rules himself because he's so cross that other people have broken the rules, and I can empathise with that.
Right. Okay. So after he gets that, we find out that he's got 8 weeks PD, and he's questioning himself. And how come I get 8 weeks PD and you only get 2? What did I do to deserve that? what did I do? He's still like sort of not quite understanding about what actually happened there. And Liz saying that you shouldn't have stuck your pencil up his nose. Just like, what has Rimmer done? Why didn't we see that scene? Why didn't we see that happen?
I think, like a lot of things, it's the comedy is in the fact that you haven't seen it.
I think it is the description of it that kind of. I think it's because it's quite comical and perhaps impractical to try and show something that they explain. Because like he says as well, goes, yeah, but you ripped up and eaten a picture of his wife as well. So like, I think if you was to see that, I think it might have been pushed the comedy a bit too far. So I do quite like the fact that it kind of is like bam, 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 cuts through and stuff. And I think the kind of suggestion and leaves you with the picture.
Yeah.
To picture it. I think that's more funnier than the actual visual gag of it, I think.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And I was being a bit facetious when I said it, but it does, as you say, it's the things that you don't see that either described or you hear that sometimes are the best. I mean, I know I've discussed on other podcasts about MI5 or Spooks, as it was known over here, with the fat fryer scene where a woman gets her head put into a fat fryer, and there was so many complaints about it. But you didn't actually see it, you just heard it, and people imagined what it was, and it was a lot worse than what they imagined compared to what they actually saw. So it's interesting. It's actually really interesting that. But
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
it was grim. It was grim, and you didn't see a thing. Yeah, I remember it vividly.
I still have yet to watch episode 3 of Spooks, and that was the episode. So I've not watched it since that moment, actually. So no.
Oh God! Right, okay, it's a great show, a great little show. So obviously he rips up, as you say, he rips up the photographer's wife, the wife's photograph. And I know why is that becoming a problem? But the thing is, not only did he rip it up, he also ate it as well, which I thought was brilliant. And then lists like Planet of the Apes or something else as well. But then, you know, we get to this like kind of the scene where we hear Rimmer go past and say, "Excuse me," which is always nice to see after, you know, when you've watched it the second time or now that you know it, it always it always reminds me of just how every time I see that scene, I'm just waiting for the "excuse me" kind of thing, which is great. And this story about the mushrooms and really kind of delving into Rimmer. I mean, what do you think to Rimmer over the course of this episode? As I say, especially towards the end when he feels like he's gone completely insane, and you've got this other alternative story of these mushrooms. That you know, and he's and all the things that help with that, with like the chicken, for example, when Hollister comes in the room. I mean, the gags are wonderfully set up in this episode, Matt, aren't they? It's just the way that, you know, as I say, the chicken's nodding his head down and using the mushrooms as an alternative story to what he actually sees, and obviously reading the diary as well helps to bring us into the episode.
Yeah, I think it's very structurally, the structure and the layering of all the kind of ongoing jokes works stupidly well, to the point where I think the whole like the whole idea of Rimmer being under the influence of like hallucinogenic. I mean, again, going back to the really weird tell don't show approach to comedy, where you flip the whole show not tell thing, where like, because he's like basically was he pretty much, Rimmer was almost like naked and just like naked and like I can't remember. I only watched it a couple of hours ago as well, but I can't remember exactly what the thing was. Where you get this image of what Rimmer was like on the hallucinogens, but we don't actually see him on it because we know that he's not actually on them anymore. But he assumes that what's happening to him is is because he's a victim of his own circumstance. So like, and it's pretty much like becoming the butt of his own joke, to the point where it's quite interesting to see the interactions with the future Rimmer, where future Rimmer seems to be a more level-headed and mature version of himself, which pays off quite well. So you get that kind of payoff of an even more, what's the word? I'm really crap with the adjectives today, of a more make funnable, if for lack of a better term, version of Rimmer, without the experiences that he's had so far. So I do quite like how that's all laid in, and that the character has used, that they used the excuse of the Lucigens for him to just start acting really crazily.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, like, it's a descent into madness, isn't it? A lot of the episode, because it does, up until the final, like, moments, you know, we're seeing, well, that version of Rimmer, which is it will be a podcast, that, Mark, by the way. We will have versions of Rimmer because there's so many of them.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think that'll be a nice one to do.
It is it's not a new thing where, like, I think it's pretty much whenever Rimmer is in a very highly stressful situation, he does kind of have a mental breakdown, and we saw it in the first episode where he starts writing "I am a fish" on his arm. So it's not completely random behaviour. So, like, as much as he has this impression of sucking up to, or brown nosing, I think this describes him once, he does have the kind of ability to kind of snap. And I think that a snap, and it is fully believable that he would snap at a superior officer, and talk to and act how he does to Hollister as part of his usual mental breakdowns that he has. So it's all fully in character with him, and I think it works just great. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'd say, this is obviously, you know, pre-Stasis, leak and more of a radiation leak, and it's in perfect tuning. What we're looking at is later down the line when you've got different versions. You've got like season 8 Rimmer, which is a human. Is that a different version to season 1 Rimmer? You know, there's like, and obviously you've got various different aspects of that, which we'll look at. Ace Rimmer is obviously another one, but when we do get to talk about the diary, there's a bit of like sort of stuff going on within this diary. The Lister's actually looking at it for a reason. I quite like the way that this is written, because it could just come across as Lister's deciding to read his book, but there's a reason for it. There's a reason for reading the diary, you know, because it is about, I remember you talking about that time when you said you saw it. So Lister vividly remembers this moment in history of Rimmer, and went, hang on a second, I'm going to have to check his diary to see what exactly happened there, because this photograph has got me thinking. You know, this aspect has got me thinking about, how does this all come together? How do we end up getting married to Kachansky? How does all this happen? But what I do quite like about the diary itself is the way that, you know, as I say, Lister's looking at it, and Rimmer kind of goes back and forward various different conversational aspects, and Rimmer let it go. It's this pure out nonsense of Christine Kachansky. See, read my diary then. So it's all that kind of thing. But the poetry that, again, it's so in tune with Rimmer that the poetry that he writes starts off to be as nice as it potentially could be, and it just falls off a cliff toward the end of it, which I think is brilliant.
You just make me really, really horny.
Yeah, and it's just, as I say, it's in total keeping with Rimmer. I think it's just perfect, you know, and it's in the written form, which is what Lister's alluding to, which I think is great.
I like the fact that it kind of again emphasises the almost blossoming brotherly relationship between the two characters, in as much as every brother, given the opportunity, would read his brother's diary, and they've both done it.
I do quite like the opposite reactions that they have as well. So, like, Rim was like, no, you can't do that. And Lister was, read it.
Yeah. It's just like, wait, I'm an open book, effectively, isn't it? That's what he's effectively saying. Right, okay, so Hall comes on the screen, and he mentions about him being unfullable, which I think it's brilliant. And they talk about his IQ, because his IQ comes up quite a bit now, and this is obviously something that's mentioned a few times. And Lister's suggesting that they go down to floor 16, and but also Holly gets, and this is something I wanted to talk about with this whole aspect. And I think we'll talk about it here, and we'll come across the actual scenes themselves. But Holly gets put onto the watch, and he's like going into when he looks at the watch, that Holly does a gag. You know, we see that in future episodes and future seasons. We get Kat, who seems to be completely with Lister. Again, similar to what we were saying with that many, like we did last week. But this one, when they go through the stasis leak and they're saying they come back, and when they come back, it's all dust. And then Kat just goes around and says, let's do it. That's because he wants to bring Rimmer back. These are the jokes that are starting to get that posse kind of thing, that, the boys from the dwarf kind of thing is starting to kick in here. Because this is the first time I've really felt that was the ensemble, the Red Dwarf that we know in later seasons. I don't know if that is how you felt about it, but it definitely felt that these four now have kind of like almost clicked into place and what we would expect Red Dwarf, if you just generally quickly think about it, would happen. You've got obviously Kat does that so many times when somebody makes a comment and he's looking for ways to put down Rimmer, and I think that this is the first time you really kind of get to see that.
It's definitely headed that way. I agree. There's the kind of like friendly banter, but it's kind of just progressed a little bit on from the fact that the cat likes Lister because he feeds him and doesn't like Rimmer. It's kind of progressed a little bit more matey amongst the three of them now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can't envision the cat and Rimmer sitting down having a conversation about anything that lasts more than like a minute before the cat walks out. But there's definitely the friendship or different kind of brotherly relationship developing between Lister and the cat. And I don't think you get something that solid until the Flintstones scene in the next series. But yeah, you can definitely see how they're trying to develop and how they want to have the cat Lister friendship bloom. So yeah, I never really thought about it like that before. So that is the shades of them developing it. But I always thought, I think it's once you get to the Flintstones conversation, that's when they click. They get what they want to be like. So
it's more in depth, isn't it? It's more in depth at that point with the Flintstone thing, and that's a lot slower paced. Kind of the actual scene itself is quite slow and purposely done to do that, to bring them into a position. Whereas this one's your typical cat, very quick quip. It's hard to say when Rimmer goes through and says, I could bring back me. Who are you thinking of bringing back? Me. Let's do it. It's that kind of like, right, okay, that's him getting down on Rimmer. But you can almost tell that Lister's kind of the way that the cat's seeing it is through Lister that way. And we mentioned about Crichton the other week, where, Crichton starts to rebel against Rimmer, and Cat's laughing along. So it's a gradual thing. It's only very small, but I think you're right. By the time you get to the Wilma story, then I think that's a solidifying of it. But you can definitely see the direction of travel, that the way they want to go with this. Okay, so just before we do get to that scene, then just before we get to the actual leak itself, we go on to the express lift, which in itself is interesting as well, because it's on something like 2,500 floors or something.
It's 2,567 floors.
And you can watch in-lift movie Gone with the Wind, which is the movie I mentioned before, which is quite a long movie.
I think it's cool that it kind of really emphasizes the size of this ship by telling you that there's 2,567 floors. Bearing in mind that there was only 199 people on board.
Yeah, I think it was 169 maybe. I can't remember, but somewhere around there. Yeah.
So there's significantly more floors than there are people. You could go for days without seeing people.
I was listening to, on the day of recording, I think it was the day before the special about the US pilot was released. I was listening to that this morning, and you had a conversation with Carl about the differences and how many people were on the Red Dwarf, and I think there's about 160 something on the UK version, whereas the US, I think it's a point that you kind of agree, I remember you agreeing with, where you said that it makes more sense there's about 3,000 on the US version of it, and for a ship that the size of Red Dwarf itself, then if it is just 160 60 whatever. It's severely understaffed. It's severely understaffed for a...
I mean, Mark, I do think that your reasoning for that and the fact that it is a mining ship is a good one. But 2,500 floors, it takes 3+ hours to get down to level 16. That's a lot of mining for 169 people.
Yeah. Again, I suppose you can justify it that you don't carry all the miners with you. You've just got miners on both sites and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's almost careless, but you can find kind of a way to explain it, I suppose.
How big is Red Dwarf? Has he actually ever said how big it is, as in terms of size?
2,567 floors.
How tall's a floor?
How
tall's a floor, Mark? And then times it by 2,000 whatever.
I don't know, about 10 foot. 10 foot.
So it's 20 feet in miles.
So don't make me do maths. This is my leisure time.
Okay. Google on the Red Dwarf fandom wiki. Red Dwarf, the eponymous spaceship Red Dwarf, is an enormous mining vessel owned by the Jupiter Mining Corporation and commanded by Captain Frank Hollister. It is 6 miles, 10 kilometers long, 5 miles tall, and 4 miles wide.
It would have been quicker for them to take the stairs. What on earth? What lift takes 3 hours? I don't know actually, but
hang on. How long's gone with the wind? How long? What's the running time? It's like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Hey, no, I know, but this is good. This is good. This is good. Good radio. This is great radio. 3 hours and 58 minutes. It's a 4-hour film. It's going to take you 4 hours in the in-flight. The thing is it's an in-flight gag, isn't it? That's what they're getting at.
Yeah, it's a gag. It's not supposed to act. Yeah.
Sorry, we're doing the very thing you did not want us to do.
Average walking speed is 4 miles an hour. It would have been quicker for them to walk.
We said we wouldn't do this.
I know, but the first opportunity we get, we've done it.
Yeah, when you say we, you too, yeah. I actively discouraged it.
Hey, it's
right,
it's
okay,
fun.
That's fine.
It's fun.
Yeah, we're not dissing it by any such imagination. We love this.
If I ever meet one of those, if I ever meet one of the engineers behind the lifts at the Jupiter Mining Corporation, we're going to have a long chat.
I think there is humour in doing what we're doing because we are doing it with love. Yeah. We're gently mocking something that we clearly adore.
And Mark, right? Okay, so if it gets too much for you, there's a cyanide pill underneath your chair.
Nice reference.
Which is incredible, and she's totally fallen onto a crash mat. I don't know if when you see it, she's totally like falling. She's been told how to fall onto the crash mat, which I love it. I love it. Those are the bits that I find really funny. It's like, yeah, that's clearly you fallen onto a crash mat because you've been told to kind of fall the way you fell. But anyway, let's move on. To the cyanide capsule, and then she takes it. And then, ironically, obviously, it's a recorded message that she's still talking when the actual thing opens, even though she's taking the cyanide pill. But the door opens, floor 16, and we end up going into the shower. And what do you think of going and landing into the shower of all places? I mean, I know we get the gag later on with the cat, Mark, but what do you think to the idea that this Stasis Leak somehow ends up in a shower room?
It's just a classic gag, isn't it? That you get the opportunity for them to walk in onto an awkward situation. It would have been dull if it had been a random room where there was no one in it. And there's this perplexed fella having a shower. And the gag with the cat, I mean, it was an obvious one, but I still laughed.
Yeah, it is. And I think the one thing that I really like, again sound like a broken record, is they eventually find Crichton to do this, but when they're in the shower, and like I said at the top of the episode, what is it? And Rimmer's going, it's a rent in the time. It's ripping a space-time continuum. What is it? The stasis room freezes time. It makes time stand still. So when you have a leak, it preserves whatever it's leaked into, and it's leaked into this room. What is it? And it's just the fact it keeps continuing on. It's a singularity, blah, blah, blah. And that's the gap that pretty much Crichton fills in once we get into season 3, doesn't he?
Are you surprised that that's my quotable dwarf of the episode?
Not surprised in the slightest, no.
Oh, actually, sorry to interrupt, but I realised that in terms of my quotable dwarf of the episode, and basically something I've actually used in real life, we've actually skipped it, and I forgot, it's the quote by Holly where they ask him what's a status leak, and he goes, yeah, it's a leak, right? And it's in stasis. And it's basically how he describes that. And that I've used that. I use that far too, or something along those lines, a bit too much in real life, where I just go. So it's not exactly stasis leak, but it's like I don't know, what's a so and so? Well, it's a so and so. Basically, if anything with like 2 words or more, it's basically me going.
Yeah,
I can't think of I'm drawing a blank of what examples I've used, but I know.
Well, no, I can give you one because there's one later in the show where it's like the theory of relativity, and it says it's a theory you give to your relatives. And but I'm guilty of that, Matt, as well. Especially if somebody says something where I can use it, and it might not necessarily be anything to do with those 2 comments. If they actually physically say something that I can spin it round, and I think they use it a bit in likes of Airplane, don't they, where they play on words. You know, it's that kind of humour. So I think there may be a bit of an Airplane thing into it. It says, well, hospital, well, what is it? Where it's around, you know, it's a place where patients go when they're sick. You know, it's that kind of word play that if I pick up on it, then I go straight onto it. So as I say, if there's a theory, well, what is it? Well, it's a theory of relatives or whatever. So I would say that is definitely my kind of humour as well. That if there's a chance to do it, I will jump on board with that at all. So yeah, I think it's that for me. Right. Okay. So so what is it? It's a magic door, Mark. It's a magic door.
It is.
Why didn't you just say that?
Because I'm not that quick. Sorry.
That's all right. Don't worry. Okay, so when we do have a look, we look around and it says, obviously, well, what's the point in, they had these conversations. Well, it's really nice that they actually go back to the bunk because they've just spent 4 hours going to deck 16. They've come 4 hours all the way back, surely, unless they walked. And then they say, well, what's the point in bringing anyone back? So they must have done another trip, maybe another day. Do you think they went the same day?
Yeah. That's implicit, isn't it?
I'm just asking the question because obviously they've already done 8 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Unless they took the stairs and went up quicker.
They took the stairs. Yeah. I mean, who wants to watch Gone with the Wind 4 times?
That's true.
They won't have changed the film, will they, if it's the same day?
No. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've just done it now.
I know.
I'm going to take the piss.
One of us.
No.
Anyway, let's go to the actual story. So it is interesting how they come back and they have this discussion about, well, what's the point in going if you can't bring anybody back? But Liz is kind of going, but I don't understand, basically. He's saying, why have we got this photograph? How has this happened? And then remember, which I'm just wondering, actually, Mark, when you've been to Poundland, did you see any boxes of Daz around? As well as you shaking back?
I had some Daz tablets not so long ago from a pound shop, yeah.
Right, okay, so Daz is still a thing as well.
Yeah, I like a pound shop. You get to see some good shit.
How much is it?
How much is it? Piss off.
Okay, so anyway, sorry, I may be getting delirious, but what do you think to Lister's kind of decision? Because this informs his character a bit in the fact that he's resigned to the fact that he's going to stay with her. Now, bearing in mind that he is going back, even if it is for a few weeks. So he basically said it was going to be a few weeks, which is interesting in itself because he could, in theory, stop the leak from happening in the first place. But but putting that to the one side, that he's willing to have a few weeks with Kachansky over the rest of his life, and it's an interesting dilemma that he's got there. And what do you think to that?
Again, I think it matches. the romantic side, or the kind of like the romantic elements of Lister in that quite a lot of his drive is because of he's probably due to basically the quest for love, for lack of a better quotable term. And I think it makes sense because I think quite a lot of his drive, and a lot of his decisions have been because of Kachansky. So it matches up. I mean, like, I think, and again, I think it's very similar to what we've saw in last week's episode, where there's kind of the drive for romantic connection will kind of, he's like one of the biggest parts of his character. So it kind of makes sense, but I'm trying not to think of logistics, but then what would he have to have gone back onto the ship where there've been two Dave Listers or not? But
well, yeah, we're getting quite deep into the what ifs, aren't we, today? But yeah, I mean, thematically, it's an interesting choice that he, and Rimmer even states, it's something out of Barbara Cartland novel, which, to be fair, I didn't quite get that reference, but I'm assuming other people will.
But it's another dated one, isn't it? A bit like Felicity Kendall's Bottom and Helen Shapiro in the first season, if you remember that as well.
Yeah.
Going back to it, I can see why they've edited these. And do you know what? If they've edited it and they've given all the actors a payday for it, I'm all for it, actually, having thought about it.
But anyway, but no, it talks about the romantic side of it, but also as well, like Lister calls him out here. He says, you don't even like me. Why are you doing this, Rimmer? You don't even like me. You know what I mean? He says, don't I? All that thing. And I think that this is an interesting time to do it, because we've been talking about the last 9 episodes about how, especially the beginnings of this season, that this character arc has developed, and the art do seem to be more together than ever. But this is the first, I think, real time that they've kind of literally gone, you don't like me, do you? Well, why are you doing this? And it's a direct play on the fact that, the whole point of Holly bringing Rimmer back is to keep him sane. It's been mentioned a couple of times, but this is the first time it's been properly directed as just a straight question, really. Again,
I think it's the idea that the person that will most challenge Lister to keep him sane is the person that will probably drive him insane or call him insane. But I think it's the one that will keep him on his toes, I think, as a person. So, if they brought back, if they brought back Peterson, then basically what's going to happen is that the last man on Earth is just going to go and get drunk with a friend who can't get drunk. Can't get drunk or go drinking, or to go drinking normally. You'd have to get Holly to put it to basically make him drunk. And I think perhaps Lister would lose that kind of self-awareness of himself. If it was Kachansky as a hologram, then again, depending on what point you are in the chronology of Red Dwarf, I doubt that you'd have the romantic entanglement with Kachansky, with the holographic Kachansky, that Lister wishes he'd have. So I think having someone who dislikes or isn't pally with Lister, at least allows them to have some kind of realism, or the ability to be straight with one another, and that to call out, so they're not living. So there's always an element of keeping each other on their toes.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at this from a slightly different angle, because it's interesting how the character of Lister and Rimmer together and how they approach it. Because only last episode we had a drunk Lister and Rimmer, and the thing, everything about you is wrong, but somehow it's right. And in this one, we have the exact same conversation. It's like Rimmer says, you're right. I don't like you. I don't like what you stand for, but for some reason, and he doesn't finish that question, but it's exactly what we were talking about last episode. But then he goes on to talk about how everything goes wrong for Rimmer, and it's that descent into not necessarily madness on this occasion, on this bit, but it's how Rimmer seems to go downhill. And he's now saying he's almost like his own doubts of making these things happen. And it's just interesting that this conversation is exactly the same conversation we had last episode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's very true, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on. But then Lister also then obviously says you meet people, you move on. He met his friend Duncan, his best friend ever taught. And this is where it gets a bit dated because he talks about having mirror on the toe caps to look at girl skirts.
I was going to call it 80s ick, I'm afraid. And I know I've referred to 80s ick before. The reality is that's a crime. And peeping Tom is not something that is okay nearly 30 years later. I just wonder whether it was at the time, though. Was that seen as just kind of like laddish stuff? Or was it okay at the time? I know I wouldn't have done it when I was 10.
Well, it's interesting. When I was younger, there was not necessarily a lot, but you could get glasses which had rear view mirrors in them as well. You know, so there would be that kind of element to it. But obviously, looking up girl skirts it's a bit icky. I would agree with that. I picked up on that straight away, as you say, straight away, mainly because it is a crime now. You know, so it's done in a different way, and it's interesting how, you know, would you cut that out now, or would they? You know, so that's where another thing where does cancel culture come into that at that point.
Rimmer was supposed to be creepy. He was supposed to be creepy, but I don't think that they would want him to be as creepy as he's sometimes now portrayed in more modern times.
This is Lister talking about this, though. That was Lister's comment about it when he was with his best mate Duncan.
That's a good point. Sorry, yeah. I put it in my notes, and you're right. It's so both of them. Yeah, I mean, the Rimmer one was the kind of like getting Magruder drunk to have sex with her, wasn't it? And this one, is now, I was uncomfortable, but I wasn't as a kid. So I don't know. I don't know.
There's a difficulty of, because arguments would be, I mean, obviously for something that's that has happened in subject matter within different subjects of, you know, do you like sort of get rid of something that was already there? It's a very, very unusual and difficult question. You know, at this moment in time, do you revise history kind of thing? And it's something that we're dealing with right now. And as you say, it's difficult. I don't know what the answer is. You know, I wouldn't want to try and give an answer now because it is just something that's just a bit strange, really. I mean, I don't know, Matt, what you think, but it seems to be, you know, as I say, it's not. It dates it, and you know, some people might say, "Well, look at it back in 1988 through 1988 size," and I get that argument. I do get that argument, but it's just it's an unusual one.
Yeah, I think also it's kind of, I don't know whether it kind of betrays Lister as a character in places as well. I mean, do you think adult Lister would wear shoes with mirrors on the soles on the ends of it? I don't know.
And that's a point. It is a reference to childhood innocence of not knowing right from wrong. That is true. That's actually a very good point, Matt, because he wasn't saying he was doing it when he was an adult. He was saying he was doing it as a kid. And, you know, I think kids are allowed to make mistakes when they don't truly understand. That's a very good point, actually. That's actually made it easier for me.
You're right. No, that makes more sense actually. And rereading the line, it's like, I can see that. So that makes some more sense. So then they realise that there's a Stasis booth, and Rimmer has not learned his lesson from Me Too, has he?
Really not.
Because it's like, you know, it says, I could bring back me, I could bring back two me's, a dead me and a living me. One for a week and one for Sunday best. So it's like, Rimmer, that didn't work last time. So
I do like that he calls himself Rimsy though.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But that is interesting, you know. It's like, don't learn from mistakes, you know. I mean, that's probably in Rimmer's character, to be fair, which is fine. And okay, Mark, so what do you think to to Cat again. This is something that comes up in later series as well about his his disguise.
I did enjoy it. I like just to some extent. I think I just like the simplicity of the cat, and I just liked it because I always do. I haven't got any more than that. I'm sorry, Kurt. I know I'm trying to get something good out of me, but I just fucking love the cat.
Well, I'm used to it now. that's all I need to get from you. But Lister again, he's really stressing. He says, "Look, I need you. We need to be undercover here. Put this on." And it's like, "Well, maybe." And he starts like working out how to hem it, which is brilliant. Okay, so Peterson's involved. We mentioned this before about the fact that Peterson's there, and Peterson's like trying to get with these girls and stuff like that, and Lister is cock blocking basically, isn't he? But that in itself is quite interesting, and the fact that Peterson's like saying "you die for this" kind of thing, and but it's an interesting dynamic purely because Peterson just thinks it's Lister, but obviously Lister knows a lot more than that, and it's a nice little play, really.
It was nice to see Peterson again as well. Like, it was nice to see Hollister. I think this episode is just it's a nice little nod to the original setup of the show. I don't think they needed to do it, but the fact that they could is pretty cool.
Definitely, yeah. It was nice to see Mark Williams again, though, as well. So it's always good to see Mark Williams.
Yeah, it is. And the thing about obviously Rimmer runs off and excuse me kind of thing as well, which is great. Obviously, we see the back end of that. And he gets into the table, and when he gets into the table, well, you're a mushroom, aren't you? But yeah, he talks into it. But what Chris Barry does really well, and I know it's a struggle, to do this, is there's some of the lines he has to get, and stuff like, and I always refer back to this during this scene as well, that it goes back to the dad is dead situation in that observation lounge, because it's like, I'm from the future. I've come to warn you, in 3 million years you'll be dead. And Pastor Rimmer just goes, really? You know what I mean? Again, but it's a play on what we've already seen, because in the episode a few episodes ago, he's saying that, well, my dad's dead. Well, they're all dead, aren't they? And it's a completely different viewpoint, but it's still the same. It's still the same story. And it's a play on the thing. It's just delivered differently.
And what I like about the scene is that it's done really, really nicely in a comedy way, because that could have been done in a really, if it had been directed in a different way, it could have been really kind of horror. Do you know what I mean? It could have been, imagine seeing your own severed head. They could have played it in a very different way.
Matt, can you imagine seeing your own severed head coming out of your table right now?
Oh, I'm used to it.
How would you react?
I'm used to it. It happens all the time. Isn't that right, Fred? Yes. See?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, the one's looking at me right now.
Brilliant. Okay. We've definitely lost it. We've lost the plot, people. So, and that all comes down, I mentioned before, we won't go into this right now, but we mentioned that, Hollister comes in a chicken uniform. This is the fancy dress, which is when we see Lister, it kind of plays into that subconsciously that, we're going to get this chicken scene, and we've talked about that, and Captain Paxo and all that kind of thing. And we find out that Christine's not on the ship, that she's on planet leave, and we enter the Ganymede Holiday Inn.
So I just want to point out that initially, when I watched this about a couple of hours ago, the actress who plays Kachansky's roommate isn't who I thought it was. And pretty much just before we started recording, I had to double check because it looks exactly like Julia St. John, and I thought it was her. Julia St. John, for those who don't know, is an actress who played Laura in the British Empire with Chris Barry, and I was convinced it was her.
Oh, right, yeah,
but it's not. It's not, and I just. And I was just like, I thought, oh, okay, I didn't realise that she was in this. And And then when I was just fact checking before we started recording this episode, turns out he wasn't. But I had to point out that I was convinced it was her, and I thought, oh, that's a really nice connection. That we have like one of Chris Barry's future castmates. Oh, hang on, no, it's not her.
Yeah, well, that I probably, to be fair, if I'd been watching it in more detail, I might have picked that up. But well, I probably wouldn't have, to be fair. But yeah, so she's on Planet Leave. She goes to, and then they say they go to the Ganymede Hotel. Another excuse, really, to go into another hotel. We've already seen it in Better Than Life. The suitcase is actually what's his face? What's he called? The warm-up
Talkie
act.
Toaster.
Yeah.
Oh, Tony Hawk's.
Tony Hawk's. Yeah, the suitcase is Tony Hawk's that talks. And then we get the cat who sees the dog, and which is interesting in itself. And I do like that. I do like the fact that he's gone down there. We actually missed something, haven't we? We've missed that scene with the cat at the doorway when Lister kind of like sort of asks about she's on planet leave, and the cat stays there.
Yeah,
you know what the scene I'm talking about. Yeah. And he kind of looks at her, and they both look at each other, and they both look down at each other, and they both look up at each other. And then Lister disappears.
Really nicely timed.
It is, yeah. I think it's nicely choreographed. And then you've got like, and I do remember this from my youth, that I had a friend who was a massive cat fan as well, and he kind of looks over at Lister as if he's going to go, a bit like he does in the first season when he's eating the chicken. And he turns back again, and then like Lister has to pull him away. And the way that the cat kind of swings his head round, it's like whoa kind of thing, and goes off. My friend used to do that all the time. He used to go wow whenever he moved around. So
someone else who quotes the cat all the time.
Yeah, he did. He used to do that all the time. So that happened. So we're in the Ganymede Hotel, and he attacks the dog. And then we go up to the hotel room, and another quotable line for me is the bit where he's talking about wine. He talks about wine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do that a lot. And so he's in 008. They open the door, and she invites them. Oh no, I think no, that's it, isn't it? So I'm losing the plot. So they see that someone else is already there. It wasn't him that was getting married to. It was the guy next to in the photograph. They walk away and he starts talking about wine. And which is something I quote all the time.
I think I'll have some wine.
What do you want, any cornflakes, darling?
I quite like wine.
What do you want, any cornflakes, darling?
I think I'll have some wine. But I quite like wine, but that scene always made me laugh. And I wouldn't have wine on my cornflakes, but, I quite often like some wine.
You can tell all that from a photograph.
Wine. Okay.
Is this the scene as well where Holly also says I was in love once with a ZX Spectrum, a Sinclair ZX81?
Yes.
She said, no, Holly, she's not for you. She's cheap, she's stupid, and she wouldn't load. Well, not for me anyway. I'm saying, Dave, that it is better to have loved and to have lost than to have listened to an album by Olivia Newton-John. And again, another possibly dated reference.
Yeah, it's Holly all over again. I do like that. It's it was a nice touch, that, and I think that Holly being mobile on that watch really works. Especially like saying when he had that licorice allsort in his pocket as well, and there's he's just got so many great one-liners, and obviously he's it's horrible down there.
It's like gooseberries,
which is brilliant. But yeah, we end up in the hotel room, and we find out it's a different Lister, a Lister with a beard, because you have to have, when they're different, you have to have them slightly different. You have to have them wearing a beard, don't you?
You know how, there's that trope of the evil doppelganger having a goatee?
Yeah.
Was that a thing in 1988? Or
yeah.
I remember it being in South Park, but that was late 90s, wasn't it?
It's from
Well, Ming the Merciless had a goatee,
It's
didn't
from
he?
Star Trek.
Flash
It's
Gordon.
from the original Star Trek because
Mirror.
Yeah, it's the Mirror Universe version of Spock had a goatee. So the whole goatee comes from the evil version of Spock. So and that's why if you've got something similar to that, you have the Killers Both Spock section is where I think at the end of the episode there's two Kirks and Spock. I think Spock's having to choose which one's the real one, and then one of them goes Killers Both Spock, and then he shoots the one who doesn't say it, and he says, "Why do you think it was me?" It's because a real Captain Kirk would have sacrificed himself to do that kind of stuff. So if you ever hear in a similar thing why he says kill us both, that's also from the same episode as the bearded evil twin. And that's been an episode of Matt Explains It All.
Well, what about Ming the Merciless? He had a beard.
But he's not the evil doppelganger, is he, though?
Well, no, he's just an evil,
Yeah.
kind of, yeah. I suppose, okay, all right. Yeah, you've got me on that.
Score one
right,
for the
okay.
Latham.
So, so we get the discussion. What do you think to Lister's quips here? Because he is a different Lister. I know he was talking about maybe an evil one, but he talks about in 5 years from now. Says, "Don't go and see Run for Your Wife." All those little jokes and the and actually there's some of the actual double screens that they've put them under and stuff like that. It's I think it works quite well in this scene actually. And when I'm watching it today, I actually thought it was quite nice that Lister, Craig Charles, had a chance to play this, because it's always up until this point, it's always been Rimmer that's had the doppelganger or the copy or be able to play two people. Mm-hmm. So it was quite nice to have him play future Lister, really.
Yeah,
that's true. And I think he was quite mean, future Lister, actually.
it was a bit, yeah. And
do you think that may be because he's got the girl and he's now settled down?
possibly. I think there's also a case that he probably knows his younger self. So probably knows his younger self, and he probably knows what his younger self was thinking. So, because he's been through that before, hasn't he? So he's like, no, get lost. I love you. You'll be me in 5 years, and they piss off.
I suppose because it's not quite the same, because they don't really talk to each other, because the future Lister, when Rimmer's talking to him, he says, come closer. Is that one as well, isn't there? Which I just thought about then. But they're not talking Lister to Lister. It's the first time that they've spoke, I think. I don't think future Lister, because they don't see him, don't they? In that episode, they don't actually physically see or can talk to future Lister, whereas this one they can. So, and then they get shoved out the door, and Lister says Smeghead, and future Lister through the door goes, and you, and then basically get the wine, and we're back into the past. And this is where things get a little bit complicated. What do you make to this final scene? What do you make to Rimmer's eventual draw into madness? It's
great.
It's really well done.
Technically, it's probably the best they've done, because how many there's like the future, there's and also the way Chris Barry delivers it, like, you know, what does he say? I can't remember exactly what he says now. 3 Listers. Splendid. Perhaps Lister here would like to go over to the fridge and open a bottle for a wine for Lister. And Lister, Rimmer here doesn't drink because he's dead, but I wouldn't mind a glass. Which is it's just like literally, you know, again, just rhyming that off, and you know, having just you are totally with, and it's not very often this happens. You are totally with Rimmer at this point. Mm-hmm. I feel like you were with him. It's like, oh my god, what the hell is going on now? Which I like. I like the fact that we're actually at that point on Rimmer's side.
Yeah, it's rare, isn't it?
I think it's because we also know that he's not actually having an hallucination, and that it's all actually real, but he doesn't know that. So we kind of feel sympathy for him, and we get him, and like, I think because we've built up this like affinity to that he's kind of been put on, and that he's actually been the victim of a prank. So he doesn't really deserve his mental breakdown that he's having. The sympathies with him rather than anyone else, I think. Yeah. And it works quite well. And
I think that goes to how magically that's written, because, you know, watching it, you don't see that happening. It's just the way that it's being delivered to you, and I think that just the writing of that, it really does work, because as you say, it's, you know, he's not mad. Rimmer's not mad here. He's like, you know, and you know, there might be hints of him going mad in future episodes, future like sort of amazing future episodes. But you've got that thing that that Chris Barry can do so well, that, you know, he can deliver that in such a way that, as you say, you know, he's not going mad, but we're seeing it through his point of view, and the fact that he is sympathetic at that point. There's
also I don't know if you've got this written down, but I remember reading about this, in that originally Kachansky was supposed to have lines in that final scene, but apparently,
because she got taken off the set, didn't she? She
got sent home early. She got sent home earlier than she should have done. So they've ended up and quite luckily decided to put her in a hat in an earlier episode. So they just basically put a slightly bigger hat on someone who clearly is not Claire Grogan. Walking in, like, basically,
and just looks down, doesn't she? She's like, kind of like,
yeah, and it's so obvious. I mean,
do we know why she was sent off site?
It was wrapped. Her scenes were wrapped, and I think they must have either missed it or something, or re-roll it or something like that.
I think they accidentally told her to go. I think she says, "Oh yeah, there's a wrap on you," and then completely forgot to mention that she had seen lines in the last bit. But is this the last appearance of Claire Grogan as Kachansky?
No, she comes back. She comes back when she's fighting for her boys, doesn't she?
Oh, when's that? I can't remember.
You know, there's a scene. Is it one of the polymorphs or thing where she said, "Say, I've got your kids here, Bexley, blah blah blah." She's in that scene.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, I think Sirens is the one I'm thinking of. I think it's not polymorph next season. I think it's season 6. Because it's when it's, as I say, they're on the planet. Well, she's on the planet, and they think it's a siren. That's it. It is definitely Sirens, because they're in Starbug, and Lister goes, "I've got to go down there." And Rimmer's going, "It's a siren." And each of them are getting different, like, images on the screen.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so that's when, yes, that's a final appearance of Kachansky then. Or not Kachansky. Yeah. Okay. I just couldn't remember if this was the last appearance of Claire Grogan. But no, apparently not.
Right, but other than that, that calls the episode to a close. Have you got anything else that you want to bring up? Anything in your notes?
Just a brief one. They highlight in this episode that it's been 3 years. And for me, 3 years is a long time. And I don't know how into Doctor Who you are, but the Doctor Who Big Finish audiobooks, they kind of fill in the gaps in between episodes of Doctor Who. And 3 years is a long time. I'd quite like to see Big Finish take on the Red Dwarf contract.
I'm not familiar with the Big Finish stuff. I'm obviously familiar with Doctor Who. But generally I'm not. I was a Sylvester McCoy Doctor, and that was kind of like my Doctor until the newest ones. And I've watched every single one of the new ones. I haven't watched many of the classics, but I mean, there's thousands of years that pass in that one. I mean, Peter Capaldi's Heaven Sent is like 6 billion years before he gets through that thing to get to Gallifrey. So, so it's quite a while to get through that. But yeah, I mean, Doctor Who's obviously slightly different though, because there's a lot of timey-wimey kind of stuff happening within there, isn't it? Whereas Red Dwarf, you would have to it's more like a prequel comic, wouldn't it? It'd be more like that kind of thing.
I just quite like the idea of some audios.
There's definitely a gap in there to do it, like without a doubt.
No, I definitely agree. Yeah, I think, or at least they give them the leeway to expand perhaps earlier Red Dwarf. The only issue with that is that you wouldn't have Crichton,
and you need Crichton. You could just have a Crichton not origin story, but a Crichton story between him doing the garden and coming back to Red Dwarf.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities actually when you think about it. There's lots of fun stuff that they could do with a Big Finish audio. Huh.
Yeah.
I'd like that.
Fantastic. Anything for you, Matt? Anything you want to bring up?
No, not really. I mean, it's a great episode, and to be fair, I think series 2 as a whole is pretty much like if it was an album, it'd be full of bangers. I can't think of a single dud at the whole lot of them. I think I prefer the previous episodes to this one in terms of just of how of a personal nature, but I can't think of anything else specifically to talk about. Really, I think it's great. The build up to the finish and the final scene works really well. I do quite like the look of future Rimmer with his kind of like weird moustache and his smoking jacket.
Yeah, his pencil tash. His pencil tash. Can't be a good pencil tash.
He's a Romero with moustache, and like his kind of smoking jacket.
So that's a different Rimmer. There in itself is a different Rimmer. We need to remember pencil tash Rimmer.
But yeah, the smoking jacket looks pretty cool as well, if I'm honest. But yeah, it's great. It's great. There's a lot more quotable moments than the previous episode, I should say, as well. But and I think it does. I think builds on its own mythology quite well. I think as well.
Yeah, I think looking at these 2 episodes that you've covered, Matt, for us on this season, that it's really interesting that the 2 episodes that you've got, because you've got, and obviously right in the middle of the season, that we've got an episode which is quite dark and emotional and has a lot of theme and character arc in it. And then you've got this one, which is going back to almost like your Future Echo sci-fi concept. And with a sci-fi concept, I think there will be more quotable stuff purely because of the concept itself. I mean, you think about Whitehall, for example, which is a reference, again, you can talk about this episode with What Is It? In Whitehall, it's What Is It? And it's Crichton delivering those lines. It's the same kind of joke, but it's quotable. Whereas, the episode before takes longer to talk about, but there's more depth to it. Now, it's not to say there isn't depth in here, because there's actually this one, to be fair, even with the concept, actually has quite a lot of what we were saying like over the episode. So we've got like sort of Rimmer and how he is, how he's descending to madness to the bottom end, and how we become sympathetic towards him. We've got Lister's romantic side of things. So everything's layered into there. It's just not as like deep. It's more kind of overt than the one that we're talking about last episode, which is more deeper and more emotional resonance.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. You eloquently put.
Thank you.
Yes,
that's what I'm here for. Anyway, Felicity Candle's bum.
Wow.
So, yeah, that calls the episode to a close. Matt, where can people find you online?
They can find me online if they want to follow my music podcast, which is Pick a Disc. They can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter under, surprisingly, Pick a Disc. If you want to follow me personally, I've got a account called under the name Zanmat, which is X and Matt. And you can also follow my new podcast, which is Ask Us About Loom, where myself and my friend Tony talk about the old point-and-click adventure games.
Excellent stuff. Mark, and where can people find you on that there interweb?
My personal Twitter is @MarkAdamsHC, but I've got 3 podcasts on the network as well as this. First one is Pull or Pass, which is a weekly geeky comic book show. That's @Pull or Pass on Twitter. Next up, I've got Right in the Childhood, which is a monthly podcast about kids' TV from the perspective of a millennial and a Gen Xer, looking at each other's favourite telly programmes from their childhoods. And finally, I've got Life's Milestones, which is based around my job as a humanist celebrant, and I talk to a different interviewee once a fortnight about marriage, naming ceremonies, and funerals.
Excellent. So you can find me on Twitter at @rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE on my raft of podcasts on the network. You can find me on the Millennium Podcast, the X-Files podcast, the Make It So, a Star Trek Picard podcast. The best thing to do is have a look at me on @Muldrake on Twitter, where you'll be able to find links to all those episodes. So thank you again, chaps, for coming on. We'll be on next week. Matt, you'll be with us next season, or potentially on another special, depending on what we do between the two seasons. But until next time, remember everyone, go away!
Elsewhere on We Made This. Frame to frame.
And one of the things that is often levelled at Christopher Nolan is that he has sort of cold and feeling films about men. What do you say to those?
Well, not in the case of Memento, no. As I said earlier, I think it uses narrative technique to paint a deeply troubling and emotional story of a man who is on a crusade of his own making, and it's unsettling, and it is very, very moving.
I'm in a Band podcast.
I just want to say Rob Halford is a hero for being in Judas Priest and also running Halford's The Mechanical Empire.
No way, is that where? That's his?
That is his, yeah.
Is that actually his? No, that's not true. Is that true?
That's fake news, guys.
Oh, wow. Is that a fictional fact?
Dude, you sold that.
That is a fictional fact.
Sold that.
That's a fictional fact.
It's a fictional fact, yeah.
Fictional.
Yeah.
I like fictional facts. I like fictional
essentially,
facts.
I like lies.
Motion pictures. It tries to do something fresh and interesting, and there was a real backlash to it because what people wanted from that trilogy was Luke Skywalker to be become Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's what they wanted,
but Isn't that, though, aren't we giving too much credence to a very vocal, admittedly, section of the fan base, who didn't like it, and for all the reasons you're talking about? But like we say, I think the film creatively, like you said, is very strong too. Did a general film goer pay as much attention to those things as the people who kind of shout and rave about it online?
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.